Hello, welcome to the Deep Dive. I want you to imagine a massive 17th century painting that is just, well, it is literally floating in the air.
Right in the middle of this enormous ancient horse riding arena.
Exactly. There are no walls, no velvet ropes. It is just art suspended in total empty space.
It is an incredible image.
And that image alone really, shatters all those preconceived notions we usually bring to Prague.
Oh, definitely. Everyone pictures the damp cobblestones and the Gothic spires.
Right, or the astronomical clock doing its little mechanical routine on the hour.
Exactly. People tend to treat this city like an architectural snow globe. Like this highly complex urban environment is just a static postcard.
Yeah, a museum exhibit preserved behind glass.
Right. Demanding quiet reverence rather than active participation.
And that is precisely the narrative we're dismantling today. We have a formidable stack of source material in front of us, freshly published travel guides, highly detailed event calendars, and underground nightlife reviews.
All of them focus squarely on the 2026 and 2027 seasons.
Yep. And our mission for you, the listener, is to chart a course past the typical crowded tourist arteries. We want to decode how this city actually operates on a structural level.
Blending its centuries-old historical foundation with a remarkably aggressive, dynamic, modern culture.
Because what really stands out in all these guides is that Prague is, it is a highly metabolic organism.
It continuously digests its own history to fuel contemporary innovation. It does not just hold on to its past.
It mines that past for raw materials to construct something entirely new.
Exactly, without losing its soul.
So, to really understand that modern identity, I think we have to start by looking at the physical vessels of the city, how Prague repurposes its actual brick and mortar.
Right, because to understand the culture, you have to look at the canvas it is painted on.
And the National Gallery Prague, or the NGP, provides a perfect entry point into this phenomenon.
The 2026 initiative is amazing. They drastically altered the accessibility of high art.
Yeah, they mandated that permanent exhibitions across several of their most significant historical venues are completely free.
Free of charge on the first Sunday of every month.
Which fundamentally changes who gets to interact with these spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And the spaces themselves are just staggering. The guides specifically highlight the Schwarzenberg Palace.
Oh, that building is incredible.
I was looking into the architecture of it, and from the street level, it is this quintessential example of the Bohemian Renaissance.
Which is basically the local Czech adaptation of the Italian Renaissance.
Right, taking those grand symmetrical Italian ideas and applying them to a harsher Central European climate using local materials. But the facade, that is what really gets me.
It's graffito technique.
Yes. I had to look up how they actually achieved that effect, and it is an incredibly tedious process.
Oh, the precision required is immense.
The artisans would layer dark plaster, then cover it with a layer of light plaster, and physically scratch away the top layer to reveal the dark underneath.
And they use this method to cover the entire Schwarzenberg Palace.
In these intricate, repeating geometric pyramids, it creates this wild optical illusion.
Where the flat walls look like they're actually covered in three-dimensional spikes.
Exactly. It is street-level visual deception from the 1500s. But then, you walk inside that deceptive Renaissance shell, and the NGP uses it to house a sprawling collection of Baroque art.
Which is such a brilliant contrast. Baroque, by its very nature, is highly emotional and intensely dramatic.
Relying heavily on deep shadows and bright highlights to evoke a visceral reaction.
Right. You also have the Sternberg Palace right next door, functioning as the vault for heavyweights like Goya and Rembrandt.
But, I found myself much more fascinated by the mechanical execution of the exhibitions.
You mean the curation?
Yeah. How they display the art seems almost more important than what is actually being displayed.
You are picking up on a crucial shift in curatorial philosophy there. The relationship between the physical space and the observer is being actively manipulated.
And the Wallstein Writing School is the prime example of this from the sources. Okay, let's unpack this because this was the standout detail for me.
That is a stunning space.
It is exactly what the name implies. A cavernous, sprawling architectural volume originally designed for aristocratic equestrian training.
An arena, essentially.
Right. And the NGP utilized this space for an exhibition on the Czech Baroque painter Petr Brandl. But rather than constructing temporary walls,
or hanging those heavy, priceless canvases on the perimeter.
Right. Instead of doing that, the curators engineered a system to mount the paintings on massive, freestanding glass panels.
The physical execution of that is quite daring. You are taking heavy wooden frames and stretched canvas and suspending them against transparent planes in the middle of a colossal room.
And it completely re-engineers your relationship with the art. When you enter that space, the paintings appear to be physically levitating in the air.
Because in a traditional gallery, the white wall acts as a hard boundary.
Yes, it forces a two-dimensional interaction. But by floating the canvas on glass, you are forced to navigate around the work.
You experience the scale of the 17th century arena simultaneously with the intimacy of the 17th century brushstrokes.
It essentially strips away that forced church-like reverence of the traditional white wall gallery.
Exactly. It asks you to consider how the physical container dictates your absorption of the information. When you force a modern viewer to reconcile a Baroque painting floating inside an equestrian arena,
you disrupt their passive consumption of history. It reminds me of a hermit crab.
a hermit crab.
Yeah, a hermit crab doesn't synthesize its own shell. It seeks out a beautiful, abandoned, structurally sound shell left behind by another organism, and it adapts it for its own survival.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
The modern artists and curators in Prague are essentially cultural hermit crabs, finding a home in the aristocratic shells of the past.
And that analogy holds up particularly well when you look at how Prague addresses its industrial infrastructure too, not just its aristocratic palaces.
Oh, like the Kunsthal.
Exactly. The Kunsthal, which opened in 2022, is a masterclass in this post-industrial adaptation.
They constructed this highly advanced contemporary art museum inside the former Zinger electrical substation.
And crucially, they did not attempt to erase the utilitarian grit of the building.
Right, for their inaugural exhibition, they directly acknowledged the substation's original purpose. They featured an installation centered entirely around the concept of art and electricity.
Culminating in a colossal, pulsing heart light installation on the roof.
They took a building that literally distributed electrical power to the city's infrastructure and reprogrammed it to distribute cultural power.
Precisely. And this trend continues in the Prague 7 district at the DOX Center for Contemporary Art.
Housed in a former factory complex.
Yes, and the structural intervention they made there is arguably one of the most audacious architectural moves in the entire city.
The Gulliver airship.
Yes. They engineered a 42-meter-long wooden structure that perfectly mimics an early 20th century Zeppelin.
And they permanently anchored it diagonally across the factory's roof. Visually, it looks as though an airship has just crash-landed onto a manufacturing plant.
The engineering alone to secure a 42-meter wooden envelope against high winds on top of a historical roof is immense.
It has to be.
But the thematic resonance is what matters. An airship represents upward mobility, travel, and viewing the world from a detached, lofty perspective.
By anchoring that symbol of imagination directly onto the hard, uncompromising reality of a working-class factory.
They are physically bridging the gap between blue-collar history and contemporary intellectualism. Visitors literally climb up into the airship to sit on beanbags and listen to literary readings.
Wow. But, there is a limit to how much culture you can consume as a passive observer of architecture and canvas.
Right. Eventually, you have to transition from the physical vessels to the living occupants.
And the sources dedicate a massive portion of their ink to the concept of the city as a living stage.
Because the visual arts only provide the backdrop. The actual metabolism of Prague is found in its performance culture.
And much like the galleries, the stages themselves carry an immense, almost intimidating historical lineage. Let's talk about the Estates Theater.
The perfect case study here. It is universally cited as the oldest operational theater in the city.
An absolute neoclassical masterpiece. And when we say neoclassical, we are talking about an architectural style that prioritizes logic, symmetry, mathematical order.
A sharp pivot away from the emotional chaos of the Baroque era we discussed earlier. It is highly structured.
And that structured acoustic perfection is exactly why it holds such a vital place in musical history.
Right.
In 1787, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart stood in that specific room on that specific stage.
And personally conducted the world premiere of his opera Don Giovanni.
Yes. And the astonishing detail in these 2026 guides is that you can still purchase a ticket to watch Don Giovanni in that exact same acoustic environment today.
It provides an unbroken lineage of performance spanning hundreds of years. You are quite literally sharing the acoustic resonance of the room with the ghost of Mozart.
Which is incredible. But I initially struggled to reconcile that level of pristine classical preservation with the rest of the 2026 calendar.
Because the spring schedule is remarkably chaotic.
Yes. May, in particular, seems to abandon all that neoclassical order entirely.
May is definitely when the contemporary performance scene asserts dominance.
The guides heavily emphasize the 25th anniversary of the Prague Fringe Festival. Fringe is this English-language experimental theater movement that completely infiltrates the lesser town district.
And they place these hyper-avant-garde performances inside venues built during the Middle Ages.
The friction there is fascinating.
The juxtaposition is the point. You aren't watching experimental theater in a sterile black box studio. You are watching it in a 600-year-old stone cellar.
And the content is wildly unconventional. The sources specifically list a show called Pickled Republic, categorized as an adult cabaret that takes place entirely within the confines of a pickling jar.
And there is a Scottish clown performance titled Arthur Vinegar Goodboy.
Right. It injects a necessary dose of absurdity into a city that could easily take its own history way too seriously.
But right alongside the avant-garde clowns, you have these massive traditional public spectacles.
The St. John's Novalis Festival on May 15th sounds almost cinematic. It is a Baroque river festival with roots stretching back to 1627.
It is a remarkable logistical feat. They import actual Venetian gondoliers and historical boats from Italy,
creating a fully illuminated flotilla right on the Vltava River.
positioned right beneath the Charles Bridge. But it isn't just a visual parade.
No, they anchor a pontoon in the river and stage a full Baroque orchestral concert accompanied by a synchronized light show.
If you think about the acoustic engineering of that scenario, playing highly dramatic Baroque music over open water,
allowing the sound to bounce off the surface of the river and reverberate against the stone arches of a 14th century bridge. It must be an all-encompassing sensory experience.
the physical environment acts as a natural amplifier, and the scale of performance only escalates as the summer progresses.
By August, the Letna Festival takes over Letna Park, which is situated on a high escarpment overlooking the city skyline.
They erect these sprawling tents, but the guides clarify this has nothing to do with traditional circus acts.
Right, there are no animals. It is entirely focused on new circus, which involves narrative-driven contemporary acrobatics pushing the absolute limits of human physical capability.
It's breathtaking to watch.
I have to stop and challenge this, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Looking at this calendar objectively, you have the Prague Spring Music Festival, the Fringe Festival, Novalis with the imported gondolas, plus various wine and beer festivals, all colliding in the month of May.
It is a dense schedule.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare for the people actually trying to live, work, and commute in Prague. Does this not simply turn the city into a congested, unlivable theme park catering exclusively to tourists?
That is the crucial tension point for any major European capital. Touristification is a highly destructive force.
Yeah, exactly.
However, the data from the sources suggests Prague navigates this differently. The key distinction is the origin of these festivals.
Okay, what do you mean?
These are not artificial corporate constructs engineered by a tourism board to extract capital.
They are indigenous to the culture.
Precisely. As you noted, Novalis has been operating since 1627. The Masopist winter carnivals predate that significantly.
Oh, wow.
These festivals function as the primary social intersection, where the local population and the transient international visitors genuinely mix.
So when you attend these events, you are not just watching a performance designed for outsiders.
No, you are witnessing the local population actively performing their own cultural identity.
So it isn't a segregated experience.
Yeah.
You aren't cordoned off in some tourist zone watching a reenactment.
Exactly. You are sharing a bench at the Letna Beer Garden or standing shoulder to shoulder on the river embankment with native Praguers. The shared celebration actually fortifies the city's authenticity rather than diluting it.
Which forms a perfect transition into how the city operates after those structured festivals end. Because eventually, the orchestras pack up their instruments, the riding schools lock their doors, and that residual energy has to go somewhere.
Right into the nightlife.
The final segment of our deep dive explores how that energy spills into the streets, fueling the unscripted theater of Prague's after-dark culture.
The nightlife in this city is heavily documented, but the sources offer a very clear directive for 2026.
To find the authentic pulse, you must exit the immediate historical center of Prague 1.
The recommendations point definitively toward neighborhoods like Karlin, Wholeservice, Letna, and Vinohrady.
This is where you escape the inflated prices, finding a genuinely excellent pint of local beer for around €2. But more importantly, it is where you find the actual social infrastructure of the city.
The Czech pub, or hospoda, is not merely a venue for alcohol consumption. It acts as the foundational community center.
A remarkably effective social leveler where class distinctions temporarily dissolve.
Exactly.
The sources highlight a specific venue that exemplifies this. Vltava, or the Golden Tiger. It is a historic pub with immense cultural gravity.
The guide notes that former U.S. President Bill Clinton was brought here for a pint, which proves its iconic status.
But the real weight of the venue comes from the legendary Czech writer Vltava. This was his regular designated haunt.
Hrabal is a towering figure in Czech literature, and his presence at the Golden Tiger is deeply significant. He didn't just drink there, he utilized the pub as his laboratory.
He absorbed the overlapping conversations, the smoke, the unpretentious noise.
And he wove that raw, unfiltered human experience directly into his prose.
Sitting at one of those wooden tables today means you are participating in a social ritual that has successfully resisted modernization for generations. It remains loud, abrasive, and entirely authentic.
But the nightlife ecosystem is not a monolith. If the raw historic pub doesn't appeal to you, the city provides the absolute inverse.
Oh, definitely. Here's where it gets really interesting. The newly opened Forbina bar is the starkest contrast I could find.
Opened in 2024, right?
Right. Located directly across from the new stage of the National Theater. It operates on a foundation of pure, curated elegance. The mixologists there have designed a highly specific cocktail menu inspired entirely by legendary ballets and operas.
The conceptual leap there is fascinating. You can attend a performance of the opera Rusalka, walk across the street, and consume a bespoke cocktail engineered to replicate the emotional and atmospheric essence of Rusalka through flavor profiles and presentation.
Or a cocktail deconstructing the Snow Queen ballet. It is high art translated into high mixology. But if that feels too refined, the guides point to the Vizorkovna dog bar for an experience entirely detached from traditional hospitality.
Vizorkovna actively defies categorization.
The sources describe it as a subterranean underground maze. And the mechanics of entering the bar completely alter the social dynamic. You do not use traditional currency.
You load cash onto a specialized chip card.
Yes, and that card becomes your only method of acquiring drinks inside.
Which is a brilliant psychological mechanism. By forcing you to convert your money into a proprietary digital chip, they immediately disconnect you from the outside reality.
It gamifies the experience and turns the underground labyrinth into a closed-loop economy, an isolated micronation.
And inside that micronation, the environment is pure chaos.
Live music blending with DJs, people gathered around foosball tables, and inexplicably, a fully functional pizza stand operating in the middle of this basement maze.
You contrast that claustrophobic underground energy with the sprawling industrial scale of the meat factory over in the Smichov district.
The meat factory occupies a massive structure that previously operated as a municipal abattoir, a slaughterhouse.
And they have aggressively repurposed it into a collision point for multiple disciplines.
It operates simultaneously as a thumping electronic nightclub, an avant-garde art gallery, an independent theater, and a live music venue.
And for those seeking a highly specialized, almost hedonistic conclusion to the night, the sources invariably point to the Hemingway bar.
With an inventory boasting over 200 distinct varieties of rum and a genuinely intimidating selection of absinthe, it truly allows you to dictate the narrative arc of your evening.
But if we pull back and analyze the spectrum, from the historic Golden Tiger to the subterranean Vizorkovna to the repurposed abattoir, it reveals something profound about how Prague views preservation.
What do you mean?
The nightlife is not merely recreational. It is a vital mechanism for architectural survival.
Are you suggesting that they preserve these historical buildings by actively putting wear and tear on them? Because the standard definition of historical preservation usually involves velvet ropes and strictly controlled environments.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. A building without a function rapidly becomes a decaying monument. By socializing, drinking, and dancing within these structures, the population maintains the metabolic rate of the spaces.
Wow.
Consuming a beer where Hrabal wrote, or navigating an electronic music set inside a former slaughterhouse, ensures these physical spaces remain deeply embedded in the daily life of the city.
You preserve the structure by relentlessly using it.
Yes.
That completely reframes the entire discussion. We initiated this deep dive by examining a static postcard, and we are concluding with the blueprint of a highly efficient living machine.
A machine that requires the visitor to abandon passive observation and engage directly with the friction of the city.
So let's distill the core insights from our journey today. We have examined how Prague weaponizes its architectural heritage to challenge modern art, suspending 17th century canvases on floating glass and anchoring wooden airships to factory roofs.
We have mapped out the city's transformation into a dynamic stage,
Analyzing the acoustic engineering of Baroque flotillas on the Vltava River, and the psychological friction of placing avant-garde clowns in medieval cellars.
and finally, we navigated the unscripted theater of the night.
Decoding how subterranean chipcard economies and repurposed abattoirs serve as vital instruments of cultural preservation. If you have been following along, you now possess the comprehensive schematic to operate as a highly informed cultural participant in Prague for the upcoming 2026 and 2027 seasons.
Before we conclude, I want to pivot the focus back to you, the listener, and the environment you currently inhabit. We have thoroughly analyzed Prague's mastery of post-industrial adaptation.
I'm curious to see how we apply this locally.
Consider the decaying infrastructure within your own city. How many abandoned manufacturing plants, obsolete electrical substations, or boarded-up historical facades do you bypass on your daily commute?
Probably dozens.
Society conditions us to view these structures purely through the lens of utility. If they no longer generate commerce or power, they are categorized as eyesores awaiting demolition.
Right.
But what occurs when you apply the curatorial lens of Prague to your own neighborhood? What would be required to transform that dormant factory into your city's own kunsthalle or meat factory?
That is a great question.
It demands a radical shift in perspective to look at the rust and concrete of a municipal slaughterhouse and recognize the foundational architecture of a vibrant cultural movement.
That is a phenomenal provocation to leave on. It completely re-engineers how you assess the physical reality right outside your front door. This brings our deep dive to a close today. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, exploring the hidden mechanisms of this amazing city. I hope our discussion has given you a completely new perspective on familiar things and inspired your own discoveries. Until next time, take care of yourself and never stop questioning the world around you.